change.
Right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the Y and Z Table. So as you guys know, this is a podcast where we discuss wonderful things with up-and-coming Generation Y and Generation Z artists. Now, here's the thing. When my team and I were thinking of who should we bring on as our first guest, almost everybody universally said one name, and that is Abby V. Welcome, Abby V. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on here.
Hey, Keshav. Pleasure to be here, man.
Yeah, thank you. So for those of you who don't know who Abby V is, which honestly I don't think is too many people, Abby V is actually an award-winning singer, songwriter, composer, and producer from Toronto, one of our own. He's a Torontonian. And he has extensive training in Indian and Western classical music. And in addition to that, he's also a wonderful R&B, pop, and Hindi and Tamil artist. So in addition to his performance and his training, I'm just going to refer to my notes here, considering how many things he's done. He's also the winner of the Astro International Superstar, and that is a televised worldwide reality singing competition with contestants from all over the world. And he's also given various concerts across North America, Southeast Asia, and India. And he's also composed, arranged, and produced numerous film scores, soundtracks, albums, and singles over his career. And his debut solo album, first of all, which we're going to talk about a lot in this podcast, consists of 8 original songs in English, Hindi, and Tamil. And it released in 2019 to critical and commercial acclaim. And I think this bio, I don't know, you should probably update it considering how much more things have happened in 2020, 2021. But thank you, Abby V, for being on the show.
Absolutely, man. It's my pleasure and happy to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to start off talking about the video. And I think I know which one I'm referring to. The 73 Ragas with Abby.
Brindavani. Remavani pare mapani nizare mapare sa nizani mapani sa.
And I'm pretty sure most people ask you, how does it feel to get that huge, recognition? And it's truly a beautiful video. But what I actually want to ask you is Abby V a planner? Does he think to himself, this is my trajectory, this is what I'm going to do to get myself forward in my career? Or is he someone who just goes with the flow and just does ideas that he comes to his head?
It's a very interesting question to start with. I think it's very strange because I've always thought of myself to be a planner, especially when it comes to something like music, because it's so important to me. It's my life. So obviously everyone thinks about their career and everyone thinks about where they want to be 5 years down the line and all these things. So they plan a few things. And I think the same way, I did plan a few things, but I think recently, ever since 73 Ragas happened, it's just been completely just sort of spontaneous. And I think now I'm at that sort of that mix where I don't know how much I'm gonna plan, and I don't know what I'm just gonna do immediately. 73 Ragas was sort of an example. So I sort of going back to how it started. I remember I went to India, and I went to India, I had just released my album and I wanted to go, promote it there. And I was working with Z to release one of my tracks, and there were a few people that I wanted to meet and all that stuff. While I was there, I got the idea for 73 Hours, and I said, you know what? As soon as I come back to Toronto, I have to execute this. So it was a very sudden idea, and when I came back, I did it, and I didn't plan the release. Now when I think about it, I have more of like a strategy. When I have a big release, I have like a proper, like I give like maybe 2-3 days. I have a poster initially, and then I have like sneak peeks and stuff like that, so that you build that the engagement and the anticipation for the project. At that time, this was actually probably my second video project online, and I had no, like I didn't know anything. I didn't know better. I just uploaded it at some random time without any sort of marketing or any sort of publicity whatsoever, and it just completely took off, and it went viral, and so that sort of spoke to me, and it's I think it taught me that sometimes when you plan things, I mean, definitely, I don't think there's any harm in planning. I think there's, as a society, as for artists, a lot of people like to sort of say, oh no, we don't plan about our future, and we don't really want to think too far ahead. We just want to create art. I think that's also great, but it's also very important sort of look at where you're going, and what your goals are. But at the same time, I think when something like this happens, it just teaches you that, like, with spontaneous projects and just consistency and just creation, um, great things can happen, and they can align beautifully with what your long-term goals are.
Yeah, because I actually remember meeting you a few years ago, and you were still kind of, in the local performance stages. And I think your debut album happened before 73 Ragas, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's just beautiful to see how, like, that sort of viral, beautiful video was able to complement that trajectory you were putting for yourself.
And I had no idea that, when I remember when I told people, so when I had the idea, I knew that it was sort of the perfect way for me to sort of bridge, pop culture and classical music, two things that I love. But when I told other people and I said, this is the concept that I had, almost everyone was very skeptical, because they thought, what, with the 73 questions with Vogue, with the original idea, it's more relatable, they would think, because it's questions and it's answers and it's celebrities. So with ragas, it's almost like, who's gonna watch it for like 15 minutes? Who's gonna just watch it, just 73 different ragas one after the other? So a lot of people had that, but I think somewhere I had that conviction that this would work, and when it did, it was beautiful, and it wasn't really that expected, but as you rightly said, I think sometimes just without planning, you just do something, you just do it with conviction and with the right intent, and I think it just works out.
Yeah, and what I love about it is the fact that it's basically all one big take, right? In my mind, I'm like, how in the world is he going to, keep the 73 rags in mind and not, sing, accidentally put a different rag when it's supposed to be Bhairav?
Yeah.
I was like, what if he mixes up the rags? He has to redo everything. But I think the organic nature, because you're laughing, you're smiling, you're, giving body language, it almost seems like it's just effortless. But I'm sure it probably took hours and hours of practice and execution. And here's the thing: you mentioned right now that the concept of blending pop or the whole Western mainstream thing as we know it, and combining classical. And I think even before 73 Raws with Abby V, I think first of all, your debut album very beautifully encompasses that. So, for example, one of the things when I heard "Subject to Change," which is one of your first tracks. It had a very R&B and a very like uplifting vibe to it, but I could very much see the Indian classical influence.
Now that I found my place, my feelings for you are subject to change. Don't feel the same.
Every modulation and I think, would that be a right observation?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's based on an Indian classical raga called Jog.
Mm-hmm.
So with the two gandhas in there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to a little sample of it?
Yeah. So actually, when I was coming up with this melody, I wanted to sort of go very pop. So like something kind of like what The Weeknd does, that kind of a vibe. And so. So so like the main chorus, so like the song sort of works on different layers, where it's talking about a breakup, and it's talking about how I was very affected by the breakup, but all of a sudden when you move to the chorus, there's a shift, and it says, what, but not anymore. My feelings for you are subject to change. I will get over this, and I will be better, and I will bounce back. So when that shift happens, melodically also there's a shift. So until then, it's minor. It's the minor pentatonic. Mm, Sa ga ma pa ni sa ni pa ma ga sa. This is the scale, and then sa ga ma pa ni sa ni pa ma ga ma ga sa. Subject to change. That note. Sa sa ga sa pa ma ga. So at the change is when it's when the tune also sort of changes. So I wanted to incorporate that in there. And then if you actually look at it, this is the scale. This is Rag Jog,
Mm.
which is a very prominent Indian classical raga. So it sort of worked on like a few different areas, and I wanted to bring that out there with a very sort of R&B, like a pop arrangement. So with the production being like almost trap and that kind of a vibe.
Hmm. That's
Yeah,
amazing, and it's very interesting because quite a few, especially contemporary Indian artists, for example, for you have been trained in both Indian classical, Western music, and even R&B. Similar
hmm,
to like even Sriram, for example, is an
yeah,
R trained artist as well, and I'm pretty sure
for sure.
contemporaries like Jonita, Sasha, all these
Yeah,
people have also had that Western training.
for
So
sure.
how does Western training affect your approach towards Indian classical music, and how does Indian classical music influence your Western approach?
Uh, that's a great question, actually. So many things. I don't think I could ever answer this or even come up with the entire list right away because there's so many things that sort of go into the like subconscious, and we sort of we use those practices in our music. So a lot of things, like for instance in Western classical music, when I like the way that I've learned it, there's a huge emphasis on warm up, so lip trills and tongue trills and breathing. So many of these aspects that perhaps in Indian classical music is slightly overlooked. I wouldn't say entirely, but slightly somewhere. So these things have really helped me. So before I do a performance, I make sure that my voice is in shape, and these things actually go a long way because you do something as it sounds kind of silly when you do like lip drills and stuff like that, but it actually increases blood circulation in your mouth. So you're able to sort of pronounce consonants more easily. Sometimes when you wake up, you'll notice that you're not able to sing as naturally as you would perhaps like in the evening. So things like these sort of help you get into that zone. Breathing, and like even other aspects like in Western music, like the use of different passages, like vocal passages, like the nasal, the head voice, the chest voice, a lot of these things. And I sort of try to, like, in first of all, there's that song called Ni Ni Ni,
Mm.
where there's, I don't know if you've heard that one, but there's, the chorus is actually entirely in like the head voice, which is not a very prominent sound in South Asian music, if you think about it, because South Asian music, like a masculine, the male sound is almost always a chest voice, and it's beautiful, but it's almost always just that chest voice. You look at a lot of the Bollywood songs that, or even with classical music, people won't really go into that register. But Western music has that. So pop music today is, that sound is a very popular sound. So you listen to any of the pop singers like Justin Bieber and like Zayn Malik and all these people, all of them sort of, they have a very beautiful upper that head voice region, which they sort of bring in on their songs. So I sort of try to, and it's a beautiful range, right? It's a beautiful range to sort of work with. So I've trained a lot in that register, and I try to bring that into my songs when I'm doing, obviously not when I'm doing like classical music, Carnatic or Hindustani, but when I'm doing more pop, Bollywood or South Asian music, I try to bring in that sound a little bit. Now, so these are the influences of Western music in my South Asian performance. Now, the other way around, I think, again, so many things. I could just touch up on a few, like for instance, the concept of raga itself, which everyone knows. I'm very fond of the concept of different scales and different modes. I think it's beautiful because in other forms of music, we don't have as many varieties of scales. In South Asian music, we have so many different uh, varieties. So within those same sort of 12 notes that are there, between, like South Asian and Western music, you could say, in South Asian music, there's just so many different combinations that you can come up with. And it's incredible because through evolution, some of these combinations have taken up life on their own. So there's just, a scale like Natakudinji, for instance, or a rag like Shri, they have a life of their own. And it might be just, just some combination of some notes here and there, but it's like, the identity is just so strong that it is its own entity. And I think that is the greatest thing that I've learned and acquired, because it's a whole different dimension of music to work with now, and as opposed to just like the minor and the Dorian and the major and Lydian and all that stuff. So that's one thing, and the other thing, a lot of other things. For instance, the concept of sargam or swaram is very prominent in South Asian music. So I think in sargam a lot. So even if I'm like doing a pop song, I sort of notate it in my mind first. So like I sang right now, like I can immediately notate it in my mind. So it's almost like a new language that I know, thanks to South Asian music. So a lot of these things sort of, they help. And I'm just very fortunate that I grew up in a place like Toronto where I could have equal access to these two worlds, or three worlds, I guess you could say, Hindustani, Carnatic, and Western. Um, yeah, and I hope more people, I genuinely do hope that more people get a chance to grow up with these parallel streams of classical music, because it really helps.
And there's a reason why it's called classical, right? It's because there's some sort of universality. There's that no matter what genre you're in, you can always trace it back to raga, or you can trace it back to talam. You can always trace things back. In fact,
Absolutely.
recently I was producing for someone, and it was a complete trap song. But even when I was engineering and building kind of the beats and the rhythm of it, I was
Yeah,
referring to talams and using that actively in contemporary
nice.
pop music, right? And
Uh,
sometimes I used to think, as a kid, why am I sitting? And we're going to talk about that after. But this whole concept of getting introduced to classical music at a very young age. But like you said,
mhm.
I mean, the influence that both contemporary Western culture or just Western music and what Indian classical can, when you combine those two, I really believe it's a deadly combination. So, I mean, I'm
For
pretty
sure.
sure you've talked about this a lot in your other interviews, but tell us a little bit about, just how the whole part, I mean, I know you're always training as a singer, but that whole first um, approach towards training, and when did it become something that wasn't a chore or a difficult thing? When did it become something that Abby V fully loved all the time?
Mhm. Um, that's a great question. I actually remember exactly when that happened, when that shift happened. So as I said, I was really into a lot of other forms of music, not classical, as a child. Just because, I mean, growing up here, you're so or anywhere, I think you're bombarded with pop music and like a lot of very tempting entertainment. So it's so easy to sort of enjoy that and go into it. And there's nothing wrong with it also, because I love pop music. I still do, and I sing a lot of it. And so that was sort of my main thing as a child, and I started performing very early. So I started doing a lot of pop songs and a lot of R&B and a lot of like Bollywood and all that stuff. Classical music, I was training a little bit here and there because my parents wanted me to learn it. So I was training a little bit, you know, just from different teachers here in Toronto. And the thing was, I was never into it. Um, Probably because also, classical music has a very the start of the training process is definitely a little bit slower. In Carnatic music, we have the Charle verses and Ajante verses and Datu verses. In Hindustani, we sort of hold a note for a very long time before even getting to a bandish, a song, and we stay on that one rag for a long period. So obviously there are benefits to this, but I think as a young child, it's definitely a little bit. It could be a little bit boring. So I I didn't really relate to classical music all that much as a child. Um, but I think in my teens there was a concert by my gurus, Shrimti Ranjini and Shrimti Gayatri, who you know as well, and they actually so they had a concert on it was actually televised. So I remember I was in the other room, and my mom was watching the concert, and I and she used to like it was like a series. So every day there were different artists and stuff like that. But and every day I was kind of a little bit intrigued. But when they sang, um, I was like, wow, what is this music? And I ran to the other room, and then I sat and I was mesmerized by that performance. So then I was like, okay, can classical music really sound this cool? Is it really this incredible? And I started, and that was a beautiful journey because then I started slowly, and this was like at the beginning of YouTube. I remember, I think it was like 2000, yeah, like 8 or something. So like beginning of YouTube for like the South Asian, like a music scene. So I remember I was just there were a few uploads being happening, and there were a few concerts being published here and there because I was here, so I couldn't actually go to concerts. So I had to sort of rely on internet music at that time. And I started getting into a lot of Carnatic and a lot of Hindustani classical music. I was a big fan of Ustad Rashid Khan, who sang this very beautiful Saraswati, and I was very intrigued by his performance, and Maru Bihag and Dr. Prabhat's Maru Bihag and my own gurus, Srimati Rajini Gayatri. And I called them up and I said, I'm completely fascinated by your music. Will you please teach me? And it was their greatness that they sort of took, like a small audition. And I don't know what they saw in me, but they accepted me on. And I was able to train from them and also from Srimati Raji Gopalakrishnan, who's another one of my gurus. So all three of them I trained from for a couple of years. And at that time, I was very serious about it because I wanted it. It wasn't like pressured from anywhere else. It was because, and that moment, I'll tell you, there was absolutely no like I didn't not for a second did I feel like, oh man, I gotta practice today, or I gotta sing this, or I gotta learn this song. I would have like all my free time would just go for learning music and not even actively learning, but just internalizing this classical music. I wanted to know all the different ragas and I wanted to know all the different compositions and all the different talas. And a lot of it had to happen by myself because I was here. I was in Toronto and my gurus were in India. So, and all the leading musicians, all the musicians that I wanted to learn from were in India. So, and at that time, not, a lot of these workshops were happening. So everything that I wanted to learn had to be like from books, from the internet, from recording and all that stuff until I go to India to learn from them for the summer. So yeah, like the 10 months, the 8, 10 months that I was here, it was all like through books and all that stuff. And that moment, I think that whole journey was great because it wasn't sort of imposed on me by anyone else, but rather it was like I wanted to learn. I wanted to know what an anudruta meant, and I wanted to know what a teka meant, and I wanted to know how do you produce more precise sounds and all these things. So I did all this research by myself, and I think that really sort of helped because the motivation was very intrinsic. So, and that's why I say, every time, in my interviews, I always talk about, there's always in Indian classical music, especially, there's a lot of emphasis on gurus and the guru shishya, relationship. And I think in perhaps even the generation, prior to mine, I think there was more of that. But I think today, if you look at it, there's the relationship is a lot more. It's not as connected because so many people are away, and there are so many people. In India, if you look at so many of the classical musicians, they are training so many young musicians from across the world, but they don't have that sort of rapport that where they can meet the gurus or the shishyas every single day. So a lot of it also has to come from inside. So a lot of parents, they will say, oh, you know what, my son or daughter wants to learn music, but they don't have a good guru. And sometimes that's not really all. Just because you have a great guru does not mean you will end up loving the music and learning everything that you want. And the other way also, just because you don't have a guru who's exceptional at teaching, that does not mean you won't end up learning a lot, because a lot of it is just your own personal journey and how much you want out of it.
Yeah, and it's really beautiful that you kind of talked about like rather than going to India and learning Indian classical and the difference versus being, thousands of kilometers away. And I kind of want to talk to you very candidly about this. The whole point of the podcast, the YNZ table is no filters. That's the whole idea behind this. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was the Indian classical music scene in North America. Um, and one of the things that I've always heard from people is that either there are people who, like you said, learn from great gurus and learn from great artists, but they almost go on their own. The tradition is not really established that much. It's more of, I learned from this person for a few years. Now I'm on my own, doing whatever I want. Or sometimes people are too textbook to the point where they're literally, doing only what's there's taught. There's no manodharmam. There's no interest to
Yeah.
pursue things beyond music. Like you mentioned, when you wanted to learn about Indian classical music, Carnatic or Hindustani, you wanted to not just learn what was taught to you, but as much as you can through books, so do you see, what are your thoughts on the way people approach Indian classical music here in North America?
Um, I think from my experience, from a lot of the peers that I follow, and I actually think it's at a very healthy um, point where I think a lot of us, because we don't get the music in abundance, we don't get exposure to classical music in abundance. So I think the value for it now is all the higher. It's every kacheri for me, every concert that if there's a concert by Dr. Prabhatre, next month, I would be like, uh, I'd just be just ever since I hear about it, I'd be thinking about it, because that concert I'm probably going to be hearing is by Dr. Prabhatre is probably once every 5 years or so, or even greater, right? Same thing with someone like Srimati Sudharaganathan, for instance, or Abhishek Raghuram. So these people, since they come at maybe once every 3 years or so, so you don't get that. Whereas if you're in India, it's you can hear these wonderful legendary musicians uh, a lot more easily. So you can sort of the December season happens and you can go to Chennai and you can hear like 10 concerts during that month itself and all that stuff. So because of that, because we don't get the exposure, and we don't have that, if you're in India, you can approach artists, you can sort of go visit them, you can talk to them after concerts, and you can have that relationship with them. Over here, it's not the case, right? So a lot of it is I think we uh, speaking from personal experience, and I know from my peers as well, I think we value uh, the music that we get so much more, just because we don't get as much of it. That's definitely there. In terms of learning music, and I think you touched upon this, I think, where we say that we learn from a certain musician just for um, some time, just for perhaps the name and all that stuff. I think that could be avoided a little bit, because when you're learning, I think it's very important. That stage is very important. That period of learning is extremely important to you as an artist, because it's very, very it's foundational, and it's very influential. It sort of shapes your thoughts. So following music that you really, really like is very important. And I was extremely grateful that I learned from three musicians whose music I adored. I absolutely, and I still do. I was a fan first and then a student. So that's of extreme value, because whatever, when they sing something, when they teach you, It's just it relates to what kind of music you want to do also at the same time. But if you're learning from someone who just because they have, they have a great following or they have a great name, but you perhaps don't relate to that music as much, um, then there's that, that mismatch, and then perhaps you don't end up taking away not you not taking away anything from either side, but I think you don't end up taking away as much as you could perhaps if you were learning from someone who you really related to. So I think that's something that in North America especially, there's a lot of, because there's so many people visiting, there's workshops and all that stuff, there's that whole culture these days. So I think it's very important to sort of choose who you follow. That's very important.
So you were not you weren't born in India, but you were raised in Canada, right? So you've kind of done your schooling here and all these things. And what was interesting, and I want to talk about this because when I heard first of all, and I saw, that there were songs in Hindi, there were songs in Tamil, there were songs in obviously English. I was like, and even when I look at your YouTube videos and all of your music, there's never like a very strict, hardcore, specific like Indian classical song. It's
Mm-hmm.
always like it's a specific classical song in a cappella, or even the instrumentation you use for it, really hardcore Indian melodies are still very kind of contemporary and Western. I want to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, for example, being an ambassador of Indian culture in Canada, right, amongst your family and your friends. When you let's just give an example. When you made First of All, and didn't you that I'm assuming when you made it, you probably thought your immediate audience were going to be those people around you and people who have heard of you in Canada.
Yeah.
So how was it? Like, how did it feel when you were like, rather than making a full-on English Western track, you have like songs like Channa Ve Channa or Ni 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 and all these different tracks. Were you like, were you hesitant? Was there some sense of nervousness that people might not really receive it that much because there's like that cross culture happening in the album, or what were your thoughts on that?
That's very interesting. I think very briefly I probably thought about that and my sort of perception as an artist and my image and all that stuff. And there was a time that I really wanted to go strictly into English and just be like a pop, like R&B artist. Um, but then I think just because of my fascination to ragas and everything, also I think it just sort of and I wanted to do both. But um, in terms of my image, I've never really thought about it that way. And you're right. I think if you look at like my social media, there's always like there'll be one post which is all about like it'll have like me doing medical in in Kalyani, and then just like 2 days after that I'll post something, or like a week after that I'll post um like like Tum Se Hi or something like that, which is like a full on Bollywood number. So I think it just I try to do, and the reason why like there's no, I don't do it at all out of strategy of sort of saying, hey, you know what, I can do this and this. I really don't, because in fact I think if I did it the other way, not like sometimes if I do something which is like a very, like for instance, a very classical piece, and if it does really well, people might, the new followers might expect me to do more of that. So I think as a strategy, it might actually work better if I did more of that same thing over and over again. But it's just, I think me as a person, I get very bored very easily. I get, even with like food and everything else, I get very bored. So I will, I'll eat something for one day and I don't want it again for a month. So the same way with also with music, one day I'll be obsessed with Bhagyashree and I'll just sing Bhagyashree all day, or like 2 days or 3 days. After that, I'll put that away and I'll just be obsessed with Post Malone, and I'll just be singing Post Malone and or Chris Brown. So I'm very sort of that way, and whatever I'm feeling at that moment, I want to sing. I never sort of, I don't plan it in a way that, okay, this is going to be, so this week on Monday, I'm going to post something that's classical, and then Friday, I'm going to post Bollywood, and then, next week it's going to be Tamil, and then it's going to be Ghazal, like that. I never do that. I just, whatever I'm posting, it's always just what I'm feeling at that moment. And so all of these songs that I've been posting, any rags that I've been posting, it's just like, it's probably just because I'm in love with that melody or that music at that point, So I just end up doing it. So I've never thought about it that way in terms of perception of like how would people, because there are definitely, I think, initially when I started, and I must say that I think right after 73 August happened, I think when I started posting some of my Bollywood stuff, there were a few comments that said, oh, you sing classical music so well. Why don't you just stick to that? Why do you want to sort of delegate yourself to Bollywood and all this stuff? So initially that was there, but it's just that I can't help it. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't because I love Bollywood music and I love R&B and I love pop music. So there's no way I can't do this. It's just a part of the artist that I am. So yeah, I just end up doing whatever I love.
Completely candid.
And I think over time, I think people have really recognized that, and I think now I see so many. When I say, when I put up a story saying, "Hey, what song should I do next?" I get requests from every single style you could think of. So I think people have started to now associate me as an artist who does all these different styles of music, rather than someone who is doing one but then also trying something else.
Mhm. And on that note, because I think it's because I don't think it's even. I would say you're not doing it because it's kind of what you're known for, but because you love it so much. But let's say 3 months from now, Abby V's going on a jog, and all of a sudden he comes up with a brilliant idea to do an 8-track complete Western pop album. Would
Mhm.
you honestly have any sort of hesitation? Would you try to figure how would that work in your head if that happened?
Oh, I'd love to. I wouldn't have any hesitation. Trust me. I would just go for it because I think music is something that, and I really believe in this. I think not just music, I think any form of art, it's just all about being in that moment and executing what ideas you have. If you miss that, there's a window, I feel. If you miss that window, like there are so many ideas that I have, or some compositions some songs that I've written, they're just on my phone, and I just never go back to it. Because I always think of something more fresh. I think of something that I'm feeling more, whatever, and so I really believe in sort of just if that idea is there, and if you really believe in it, if you have that conviction, go for it. It will work out. If you believe in it, someone else will also. So if I yeah, like I mean, to answer your question, if I had an idea about a few songs, doing like an EP or an album with just English pop music, I would go for it right away.
And the reason why I asked that question is because I think your statement is absolutely important, especially in today's world where, on one hand, people are, in their own experimental zone where they do what they want, and then there's other people who look for inspiration but are trying to replicate what they've already done or other people. So it's really inspiring to hear that you, just as an artist, you satisfy the artist in you first before the audience, right? And I think
Yeah,
that's what people love about you and your music as well, right? Is that ABV loves
absolutely.
before we do. That's awesome. So in terms of, so we're going to talk, we have to address this, the pandemic, right? It seems that for you, it's been a double-edged sword where people are, recognizing and loving Abby V more through social media and all these videos. But at the same time, when you and I talked backstage, we were talking about the inability to do our original projects that due to the pandemic's restrictions. How
Hmm.
have you taken this pandemic and what has it done to you personally and professionally?
um, I think when it started, I remember because 73 Ragas came out in January, end of January 2020, and the pandemic started about a month after that. So January 2020, the end of about February 2020, let's say, the video goes viral, and I'm finally, so it takes a lot out of me. I was very insecure about posting videos online, and it took me a very long time to sort of really come out of that anxiety and that space and just go for it. So 73 August, as I said, that was actually my second ever video project that I put up. And it worked really well, and I was extremely grateful for all the love. Um, and it was there, and within that 1 month, so end of January to end of February, I had, tons of people getting in touch, and tours booked, and, and dates, blocked for concerts, and all these other things. It's phenomenal. And then the pandemic happened. So everything is now on a standstill. So can you imagine, for someone who, I mean, for me, it took the longest time to sort of build the courage to sort of finally get on this online space. And I finally do it, and I finally sort of, there's something that's been successful. Um, and then this happens. So it was extremely tough at that time. It was, not gonna lie, it was definitely, it was a little bit, it felt very unfair, and it felt as if, I've there's been so much that I've done, and so much work that I put in, and finally I thought I did something that worked, and it clicked, and this happened. So, but then I think after a certain point, there was like, I think, a month or two that I took as just a break, and I didn't feel like doing much because there were so many collaborations that were planned, so many tours that were planned, and so many ideas. So I'd spoken to musicians that I've looked up to, so much, and I had plans to sort of work with them, and travel, and do all these things. But because of the pandemic, and lockdown and all that stuff, I had to stay home. But I think once I sort of, after about a month or two, I took a break, I remember, and then I said, you know what, there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing anyone can do about this at this moment. So I think it's just, I just have to move on, and I just have to sort of keep creating. Uh, I'm at least grateful that 73 August happened, and it was like a viral success, which got me an audience, which I'm extremely grateful for. And and I think more power to this this community that's been there with me, because it's almost been like a family that's helped me through this this time. Because if it weren't for this, and because it was such a newly acquired sort of community, uh, 73 August just happened, and then all this. So we all sort of came in to this whole pandemic thing together. So I made like thousands of new connections, new friends, uh, through those like 2 3 months, and they were all with me. So I started posting more regularly, and there was so much love, and there was so much support. And that's when I realized, you know what, I think it's very silly of me to be complaining about these things, because I have such great people as cheerleaders, and I'm still able to do music. I'm still able to execute my ideas. I'm still able to creatively satisfy, whatever, my creative sort of ideas are. And I think, and that cannot be taken for granted, right? So at that point, I started taking things more seriously, and I started doing a lot of fun, exciting projects that I would not have perhaps done earlier. Like the a cappella series actually came, because of this, because a lot of those songs I had planned with certain musicians, and because perhaps those musicians didn't have a recording setup at their place, or they weren't able to go to a studio at that time, I had to sort of do the music myself. So I said, you know what, let me just do a cappella. So I did the entire arrangement myself, and I vocalized it, and obviously it took so much more time, but then I did have time because it was a pandemic. So, and I got to sort of interact with so many amazing musicians uh, because of this. So if it weren't for the pandemic, I think a lot of these musicians would have been touring. I would have been traveling. They would have been traveling. They would have been busy recording and all that stuff. But I think because of the stay-at-home orders, everyone was home. We were able to sort of communicate and work together. So many phenomenal musicians like Shivangi and Antara and Aishwarya and Navneet, and so many other musicians that I've had the opportunity to work with remotely, where I send my vocals from here and they send theirs from there, and we work together. So I think the lockdown has definitely been, it was challenging at the beginning, but I think now it's had, I try to look at it in a very positive way. And I think it's really helped me in a lot of ways.
It's amazing, and one of the things you mentioned really well was just the idea that irrespective of the circumstances we're in, you were able to find a way to still do music and do things. And I think the pandemic's hit hard on a lot of artists as well, and people think it's never ending, but sometimes the pandemic can be used to our advantage as well, right? And you're spreading
Definitely.
positivity. So I want to talk about So you mentioned that you also produced, because when your collaborations for acapellas, I can only imagine how much of a headache that would have been getting the files back and forth. And but you made a workflow for yourself, and of course, and first of all, one of my favorite tracks, "Subject to Change." I remember listening to it, and I'm like, I wonder who the producer is, and then I ended up seeing your name on there. And so you compose, you write lyrics, and you produce. Now I want to talk about music producing. Um, some artists, they just sing and they have their own set of producers. But did you produce? Was that something out of passion, or is that something out of like, I want my ideas to be done? So, how exactly did you get into producing?
Um, Producing is actually is a whole different ballgame, and I think you know it even better than I do. Keshav, you're an excellent producer yourself, and I think it's definitely something that requires a whole different mindset, and and there's so many possibilities because you can sort of make a composition sound from you know anything to anything with just whatever tools and resources you have. So I do produce, and I started producing a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, and it's been great. I enjoy producing when it's something that I relate to. I'm not predominantly a producer. I because I think there's just it's so much so many options out there. So I get a little bit sort of anxious when I look at like the number of possibilities that something even if you have like even if you want like a kick, there's like thousands of examples, and like to go through all of them. And for me, I suffer from OCD a little bit, and like actually diagnosed with OCD. So I have this compulsive sort of need to sort of go through all the different options before I finalize on one. So a lot of these things really sort of trigger this sort of paranoia or this anxious feeling when it comes to producing. So I don't produce all that much, and I do work with a lot of producers, as do a lot of artists, a lot of my contemporaries. But I do, I think it really helps that I know how to produce because I can sort of communicate exactly what I want. So if I want something, like if I say that what, for this track I think let's go for just like just a kick and like a hi hat, and let's not go for the mid and stuff like that. And if I say let's just have um, like more of like an ambient that kind of an arrangement, and let's not do like drops and stuff like that. So I think a lot of these terms that producers work with, it sort of helps us in communicating, even if we're working with other producers. It helps to sort of communicate what we want. So I think it's a very essential skill for any musician to know how to produce even a little bit, or at least understand, just because so much of our music today is produced. So many of our tracks, so many of our ideas are sort of, produced digitally on on like our DAWs. So I think it's very important to sort of understand how the different possibilities can sort of shape your ideas and how to work with them.
Yeah, and I think even as a composer myself, when I was thinking that you've done quite a bit of mixing and mastering too, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know the mic that you use, and when I was watching some of your cover videos for even Tumsehi and all these things, it almost feels like you kind of know what you're gonna do in your mix. You kind of know how the microphone will pick up your voice, and you're able to make little changes,
Mm-hmm.
make a voice a bit more airy, or make your voice a little bit more certain way, because in the mix it's going to sound this way.
Yeah,
Do you ever do things
yeah.
like
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I love mixing. I really enjoy it. I think because there's not as many options as producing, right? So it's like, and I have like a nice vision when I mix, so I really enjoy the process. So yeah, I think because of this constant, um, during the pandemic, I've just been recording myself, and I've just been recording at different places, and all these things, and I've been editing myself. So this experience has sort of taught me a lot of things as I work with a few different mics, and I know how to sort of place the mics, and I know which one sounds good for which project. So if I'm doing something which is um, more a cappella, I'll use a different kind of mic and stuff like that. So a lot of these things, I think it's just experience that I've luckily gained through them, and I think there's still so much to learn. There's so much that I wish I could sort of I wish I could just spend some time every day just learning about these things like producing and mixing and mastering and all that stuff. But I'm getting there a little bit.
It's amazing, and like I completely agree that I think even if you're a singer and you want to remain a singer, I think just knowing a little bit of all the skills involved in your line
Absolutely,
is so
absolutely,
essential.
very important. Yeah, especially I think because today in South Asia, there's this whole concept of being a playback singer, where you are a singer and you sing someone else's composition. So you go to the studio and you sing and you sort of work for that one performance, that one song, and then you come back home. So uh, the entire song is not really your responsibility after the recording is done in a way. And I think that's also a great culture. I think it's wonderful because you get this whole new perception. So someone else creates a song, but then someone else sort of brings it to life, in a way. So I think that's also great. Uh, but in the trend that it's moving in now, even with the South Asian music industry, there's a lot of independent music that's happening. There's a lot of non-film music. So when it comes to non-film music, I think the artists are sort of um, they encompass a lot of the different hats. So they are also in charge of sort of producing the whole track, and they're singing it, they're writing the songs. They're it's like their image. The song is not part of some Bollywood film, which will be taken care of by the producers. If you're an independent artist, the song is sort of, so if Keshav is coming up with the song, it's like it's completely you. So it's sort of your responsibility now, right? So you have to be all the more aware of all the different things that go into making a song. A song. So everything from mixing and producing and mastering and like the harmonies and all these things I think are very important. So I think the way that the industry is moving today, I think it's very important for artists to be aware of uh, the different things that play into the creation of a song. And it doesn't hurt. It definitely doesn't hurt to sort of be aware. You don't have to go into it full time, but I think being aware of all these different things is very important.
Yeah, and I definitely agree because nowadays, 20 years ago compared to now, it's much more easier to make music or to make films compared to what it was 20 years ago because everything has advanced. And I think at this point to gain that independent recognition, it's kind of like you have to do all the work at least in the beginning. You have to
Mm-hmm.
be your own producer, you have to be your own, mix engineer, mastering engineer, and then when you get to that level, you kind of go more into the playback singing tradition. But yeah, definitely, I think it's important for musicians to,
Absolutely.
know, you have
Absolutely.
to be a
Yeah.
jack of all trades, but at least know a little bit about each trade.
Definitely.
Um,
Definitely.
yeah, and so one of the things that I actually haven't seen in a while, and it was really heartwarming to see in a lot of what you do, is the inclusion of family, because I think we're in a tradition where every artist, their family is always in the back of them, but we only see them. But recently we were talking, right? Your collaborations with your father,
Mm-hmm.
and many of the songs, and even I believe it was your nephew in the lullaby mastering
Yeah.
that you made the video,
Yeah.
and it's really beautiful to see the inclusion of family because it kind of reminds us that Abby V is still a family man. Abby V is still someone who loves his family just as much as music. So, talk to me about the importance of family in your life or in your career.
Absolutely. I think you got it right. I'm very attached to my family, and I think especially with my dad because he's also a musician. He's not he doesn't do it full time. He's not a career musician, but he's very passionate about music. So I think I'm sort of vicariously living his dream of pursuing music. So and I think it was a very random, very sudden sort of idea where I think it was Father's Day in 2020. So it was around Father's Day, and I think it was just like 2 days before, believe it or not. And someone told me that it's Father's Day in 2 days. And I said, you know what? It's Father's Day. I think maybe we should do something. And I already had some other project planned for around that weekend. But I said, you know what? I think it's a great occasion to do this. And my dad, he sings beautifully. And, from all the comments, I'm sure you can see that, everyone will agree with me on this, that his voice is even more rounded than mine is. And he's just an exceptional vocalist. And I just really, it was just not at all out of this. Um, I just really enjoy his music, so I just really wanted to sort of have that, that experience of singing with him and having a project.
பொன்னொன்று கண்டேன் பெண்ணங்கு இல்லை என்னென்று நான் சொல்லலாகுமா என்னென்று நான் சொல்ல வேண்டுமா.
So we did a Father's Day project, and there was so much love, which I didn't expect. It was so quick. We just sang, recorded, and I think the video was up by like the next day. So it's very, very quick, and we didn't really expect that it would do so well, but it ended up doing extremely well. And I got so many people messaging me and my father about the project, and we decided to sort of make it a series, a father-son duo series. So we've done a couple of more projects, and they've all been, so widely loved, and we're so grateful because um, I'm just happy that I'm able to sort of bring his dream of singing and having that and sharing his music to the world. I'm able to sort of somehow in a small way help facilitate that. So I think that's it's very important. I'm very attached to my parents, and of course my new 1-year-old nephew, who you touched upon with that lullaby video. So my sister so my nephew actually has a great connection with my music because he was born the night that we filmed 73 Others.
Oh wow, really?
He was born that same night. So the morning of filming, my sister was experiencing labor pains, and I was like, should I still go ahead with the video? And she's like, no, don't worry, because it's probably going to be a while since until I actually deliver. So you can go ahead. So I finished filming in the morning, and he was born late that night. So he has that sort of a connection, and he was actually the one when I was uploading the video. I remember he was actually on my lap, and I was taking care of him. So we sort of jointly uploaded 73 August on YouTube. And so I think he's been there from the very beginning. So 73 August in a way was sort of the beginning of my career, and he's been there from the very beginning. So
yeah, and I'm pretty sure when he gets a bit older or when he's in his 40s and be like, hey, you see this video right here, the 73 August? Exactly, you were born in.
I was the one who uploaded it. Yeah, for sure, right?
Yeah, amazing. I'm gonna ask you the final couple of questions. One of them being, I'm going to ask you a very spicy one now, a coffee with Karan type of question. So, you've talked a lot about your process and your journey. How was it because I remember going on Instagram and I saw this on your story. What was your reaction when you saw your first fan page? What was your reaction then?
It was crazy. I think fan page, of course, happened. I think a lot of things sort of happened at the same time. So the fan page, the verification, all these things sort of came in along, together. And I've just been, I've always sort of had a very sort of friendly relationship with everyone who relates to my music. So I try to respond to as many messages as I can. So I know a lot of them on like a first name basis. And so when the fan page was created initially, I think I didn't know who they were, and they were posting all these memes and all that stuff. And there was another fan page also which was created a couple months ago. I don't know if that one's as active anymore, but what was that?
Was it Abby Forever?
I think that's the current one. I think there's another one which was created a couple of months ago, and that was also there. So when I see these, I think it's just I'm just so obviously I don't take it too hard. You know, I don't sort of mm,
Get it to your head.
yeah yeah. So you know, obviously when I see these, you know, I feel extremely grateful for this kind of love. And for me, I think especially being so recent into the scene, being so I've sort of just begun in a way. Um, with like about a year ago is when 73 Hours happened. So I think immediately for you know with the verification and the fan pages and all that stuff, it's just so it's 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 incredible, and I'm just very grateful for the love. So I try to interact with them as much as I can. So I try to sort of you know reshare any of their posts, stuff like that. So it feels nice for sure.
That's awesome. I can see that little red blush right there. Let's zoom in on that. Yeah. So kind of the second final question I have, and I think this is kind of hearing it from someone like you can really make a difference. Is we're part of Generation Y and Z, the up and coming for the future,
Hmm.
and especially in the art scene, right? How as a generation, how do you think we're doing? What are some of the things that we're doing right as a generation in any form of art, or you can even talk about music? And what are some things that we can improve on or do better?
uh,
That's a tough question, I know.
that's a very tough question because I'm definitely part of this, you know, the demographic that you're talking about. So I think it's a little bit tricky when I'm answering it. But having said that, I think there's one thing that I would say, which is I think our generation and every generation following, you know, like even like people who are younger than me, I see they're so dedicated, and I think that's such a great thing because they have such a great grasp on what is important. And you know, I look at even like someone like Antara who's younger than me, and she's you know I look at the way that she works. It's very inspiring because so many of them they have this plan and they have this sort of this structure and they treat it very seriously. So it's not just like you know oh I'm doing something and I'm just like a social media influencer and I can just do whatever I want. It's not that they never take it for granted. And I think myself included, I try not to take anything granted in that sense because whatever I post, you know I make sure that it's like it's authentic and it's me and you know there's intent behind it and it's not something that's irresponsible in any way. I think it's a very beautiful way to sort of approach this, especially when it's your career. You know, when it's something so important like your profession, I think you have to be so much more serious about it. So I see that as a difference between our generation and the generation prior to mine, where you know perhaps the seriousness was definitely there. I would never say it wasn't there, but perhaps it was for other things like you know you know concert management and PR and stuff like that. I think now when we are able to take care of our own PR, you know, it's just we're so much more responsible. So that's one thing. The thing that I think we could improve on is probably just um, spending some time to just internalize the art. I think that's something that we could focus a little bit more on because I look at my the previous generation and you know I sort of envy them in a way that at that time when they were learning music or when they were just sort of in that student phase, not as many distractions, right? So I think when if they could just, so I like you know my gurus for instance they would listen to like you know cassettes of legendary musicians and that's how they would fall asleep. Can you imagine doing that now? You can't because you have YouTube and you have like even if you want to fall like I fall asleep to like ASMR videos, which is ridiculous, right? But you know, if you could sort of you know dedicate that time for just your craft and just for the art and just internalizing it and just spending instead of even just thinking, just doing that sadhana and that meditation with the art, I think that's a very important aspect of internalizing what you're doing. Because my guru always says, Shrimpi Gayatri, she always says that whatever you hear, if it's something that connects with you, it stays inside of you, and somewhere, someday, it comes out. So it can be something like it can be like a pop song, and that phrase, that Sankati might even come out in like a Carnatic piece that I'm doing. But so these things, so that internalization, that process, that journey of internalizing music and having that being one with that music and just being in that zone is so important. And I've had a phase when I've had that, and I'm speaking from experience because I've had phase when I was in high school and university, and all I could do was just think of this music, and that's it. And that's why, like for me, the concept I have, that's just like was so internalized because I could just I was breathing this music. So I think that is very important, and I'd love to still do it now. But I think it's just the times that we live in, so many distractions, and it's a little bit difficult for sure. But if there's something that I would say that our generation and every generation following should probably focus on, is probably just taking that time off every day from all of this clutter and all of this consumption and all of this creating, and focus on sort of being one with the art and just internalizing and just not thinking about anything else, just imbibing and just internalizing.
Exactly, very true. And the beauty of what your statement is, it's universal to all types of art form. Like even as a filmmaker myself, and I look at my peers, there's so much great cinema out there that we're always constantly consuming them, and even through YouTube, reading these analysis of all of these things. But if you really think about it, when we talk about the classic films, it was always before the time of when technology dominated. And one of the things I've always noticed is this consistent theme of being connected intrinsically with your art. Like
Mm-hmm.
always spending time, being distracted by things or always working, taking that moment every day, understanding, strengthening your identity as an artist. Because at the end of the day, all art is just an extension of the artist, right? In some way or form.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think absolutely right. It's about spending that time and understanding who am I, one as a person. How does that person translate to being an artist? And how does that translate from being an artist to art? So thank you for that
absolutely.
statement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you. So my last question for you, and this is the template question for every interview, but um, like what is now Abby V as of Friday, March 12th, 2021? From now till the future or the near future, what are some things you have in mind in terms of collaborations? Has this recent couple of years for you changed your trajectory that you had maybe years ago as an artist? Talk to us about what the future looks like for Abby V.
It's interesting. I think definitely very musical, hopefully, and a lot of. So I'm in touch now that things are opening up. I'm definitely in, all those tours and all those meetings that I had planned and collaborations. Now planning those again. So I think in the next couple of months, that's definitely there in terms of going out and getting back in terms of performing and collaborating with artists. And I think definitely a trip to India is on the card. So a lot of musicians that I've been in touch with over the last couple of months, I'd love to go and work with them. So that's definitely there. In terms of my own personal sort of long term goal going forward, I think it's just to I think it's to create music that's very meaningful to me. And even right now, whatever music that I do create, even if it's sort of like a cover of an existing Bollywood song or Tamil song, I try to sort of recreate the entire thing myself so that it's 100% me. Um, Obviously with significant influence from the original, but in a way that it's repackaged in my style in a way. So I think going forward, I think a lot of the originals that I do and a lot of the projects, I think I'd like to sort of present it in a way that I really relate with. So whether it's classical music, even with like the whole 73 album, concept. I think it was very representative of who I am as a person. I've grown up here in Toronto, but very rooted in classical music and all that stuff. So I think representing that in my art is very important for me, and I think that translates very well because I believe in it so strongly. So I think others also end up believing in it. So I think that's definitely the goal for the future, to sort of embrace that and do more original work in that space of being authentic and being honest to who I am.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I know for a fact that, a few years from now, or even as soon as possible, like things are going to only get better for you. And thank you so much on behalf of the Gen Y and Z and so many people around the world for giving us such beautiful music. And ABV's
Thank you, Keshav, and I must say I'm a big fan of yours as well. I've heard your album, and it's some phenomenal work, and I look forward to hearing so much. I know that we spoke, prior to this, and you told me that you have some very exciting projects coming up. So I look forward to hearing those, and definitely looking forward to working together as well.
Thank you so much. And yeah, definitely here at Riverbed Entertainment, our goal is to take our generation and give them a platform to embrace their art and give them a voice and make them, artists as well. So it's really inspiring to have you be our first speaker. And we wish you the very best. We wish your father the very best. He's going to also be a big singer soon, I'm sure about that. And thank you so much for all your time. And I look forward to seeing more of you very soon.
Absolutely, Keshav. Same here. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
To change.